In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate an important concept in Java known as the exception handling. So we know what exception handling is, but just to reiterate one more time, it's one of the most powerful mechanisms to handle the runtime errors so that normal flow of the application can be maintained. So that's just the basics of what exception handling is. There are several types of exception handle. For example, there is a checked exception, unchecked exception, and then of course there's an error. There is a difference between an error and exception handling. So first, the checked exception, the classes that extends basically the throwable class except the runtime exception and error are called the checked exceptions. And on the other hand, the unchecked are, for example, the classes that extend the same runtime exception are known as the unchecked exceptions. And this could be, for example, the arithmetic exception and null pointer exception and so on. So different Java exception handling keywords are used within the program. So for example, we can use a keyword such as try, catch, finally, throw, and throws. So there are different keywords that we can actually use to work with exception handling in Java. It is also important to understand the difference between errors and exception. As mentioned earlier, exceptions are conditions within our code. So for example, you as a developer can handle such conditions and take necessary corrective actions. So an example would be divided by zero exception, null pointer exception, arithmetic exception, and so on. The errors, on the other hand, indicate serious problems or abnormalities conditions that most applications should not try to handle. And these errors basically defines problems that are not expected to be caught under normal circumstances by the program. So this error could be, as an example, would be a memory error or a hardware error or a Java virtual machine error and so on. So just wanted to reiterate the basic difference between exceptions and errors. Next, let me go ahead and demonstrate, in fact, by writing and using various keywords so that you can actually see the exception handling in Java in action. So let me go ahead and open up the Eclipse editor. So once I'm in the Eclipse editor, I'm going to go ahead and create a simple program and demonstrate the Java exception. I'm going to use the throw keyword to begin with. So let's say we need to create a program and we're going to check the student age, right? So if the age of the student is less than 12, for example, and the weight of the student is less than 40, then our program should return that the student is not eligible for registration. Okay, so that's the basic idea. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and simply navigate to the src folder, select the default package, and then let's go ahead and create a new Java class. And I'm going to call this, let's say, exception 5. And then click finish. And this creates a public class called exception 5. Let's begin our code. So let's use our static void and then check eligibility. And I'm checking the eligibility, and then I'm going to specify certain parameters like int. First is my student age, so I'm going to call this stu age, comma, and then another integer would be the weight, right? So I need to define those. So it'll be stu and then weight. Open the curly braces and then simply do the if condition, right? So if the student age is less than 12 and the weight is less than 40, then it's going to throw an exception. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the if, and then stu age is less than 12, right? That's the first part of the condition. And then I'm going to say and stu weight is less than 40. That's our second criteria. It's going to throw in exception. So the keyword I'm going to use here for exception handling is throw new arithmetic exception. So just type the word arithmetic exception, and then within the parentheses, let's go ahead and print out student is not eligible for registration. So just a simple exception. It's going to throw out arithmetic exception, and it's going to say student at this point is not eligible for the registration. And of course I need a semicolon, close the parentheses. I also need an else, do a system printout. So system dot out dot print in, that's what I'm going to use. And then I'm going to say entries valid, right? So just go ahead and type entries valid, couple of exclamation marks, and then I need to make sure that I have the semicolon, and then close my curly braces, 2 of them, because I have 2 of them open on top. Next, I'm going to go ahead and do the public static void, and then of course our main string with our command line arguments. Open the curly braces, and then simply do a system dot out dot print in. And then here I'm going to use and say something like welcome to the registration process, right? So let's go ahead and do welcome to the registration process, and then use the semicolon, and I'm going to say and simply use the check eligibility, right? So let's go ahead and do enter a new line here, and I'm going to go ahead and do check eligibility, and then of course I need the 10,39 semicolon, goes outside the parentheses, and finally do the system dot out dot print in. And here I'm going to say, could be anything, let's just say have a nice day. Great, quotations, and then of course I need another set of curly braces. Let me go ahead and fix up the print in, make sure I have my quote here. It's a good thing about these editors. And then one more syntax and token. Let me get rid of this. Perfect. All right, so a simple class that we created, right? And we're checking if the student is less than 12 years of age and the weight is less than 40, is going to throw an arithmetic exception and print out student is not eligible for registration. Else is going to say entries is valid. So let's go ahead and execute this, and just going to demonstrate the exception, right? So you can actually see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, Control S on my keyboard, and then of course run exception5.java, and let's see the results. Perfect. So it says exception in thread main, welcome to the registration process, and that's exactly what we actually intended, because it's going to throw an exception. Student is not eligible for registration. Also tells us that on the output section here that the student is not eligible for registration. So that's just one example of throwing an exception in Java. Let's do another one. Let's continue on. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on the default package, new, and then create a new class. And this time I'm going to call this exception demo 2. So exception demo 2. You can give this any name if you like. Click finish. So here I'm going to start with a class first. And then within my class, I'm going to go ahead and do, let's say, the public static void, and then of course our main string with our command line argument. Once I'm done with this, I'm going to go ahead and open the curly braces. And here, let's go ahead and do try curly braces, specify int a as an empty array. And this is going to throw out an exception for the array, by the way, okay? Just another example. So, and this is going to equal our new int array that contains 10, for example. It could be any number. Semicolon. And then next, this array has only, let's say, 10 elements, right? That's what I defined here. So this array A, for example, equals new int with 10 elements. Now, let me go ahead and put a comment here. So array has only 10 elements. Next, I'm going to define an array with 11 elements, right? So, in other words, different from what I originally defined. So I'm going to go ahead and say A, for example. I'm just going to say 11. And this is going to equal 9. Close the brackets. And of course, I need the semicolon. Close the curly braces. Perfect. So I know that the int a array has 10 elements, but I again defined an array that contains more than 10 elements. So I'm going to go ahead and use the catch keyword for exception handling this time. So catch, and then open the parentheses. I'm going to say array index out of bounds, and then exception E, close the parentheses, open the curly braces, and let's do a simple printout. So system.out.println. And once I have the print in, I'm going to say within the parentheses, let's say the array index out of bounds. That's all, right? That's what we're printing out. So semicolon, and then of course my curly braces are closed. Let's get rid of the extra apostrophe here, and let's fix up our print in. Perfect. And make sure our catch statement is also correct. So it's array index out of bounds. I need the O capital of this. Perfect. Great. So in this example, we are using the catch keyword to throw an exception. So let's go ahead and save. I'm going to hit Control S on my keyboard and run the demo 2. And the output, of course, is array index out of bounds. Perfect. Let me do one more example, right? Just to reinforce some of the learning concept. And I'm going to use the catch keyword again, but this time I'm going to demonstrate the number format exception. Okay, so not the array, we're done with that. And here I'm going to use another class, create a new class, and demonstrate the number format exception. So let's go ahead, simply right click on our default package, new, and then click on class. I'm going to give this a name. I'm going to call this exception demo, let's say 3. Click finish. Perfect. Let's start with the class first. And here I'm going to go ahead and first do the public, static, void, and then of course our main string and the command line argument, set of brackets. Then I'm going to go ahead and open the curly braces. Let's do try. Curly braces open one more time. And let's say we need to, since we're doing the number format, right? So I'm going to say int num equals integer dot, I'm going to use parse int, and parses the string argument. That's what parse int does, right? So it simply parses the string argument as a signed decimal integer, right? That's all that does. So once I use the parse int, I'm going to go ahead and do, let's say, ABC. Could be anything, as long as it's a string, semicolon, and then let's do the system.out.println, and I'm printing, let's say, the num variable here. So after the num variable, close the curly braces, and here I'm going to specify the catch. So I'm going to go ahead and do catch. And what am I in fact catching? The number format exception, right? So it's number with a capital N, format, and then exception, and then of course use the E, close the parentheses, open the curly braces, and let's do a simple printout. So system.out.println, and I'm just going to type number format exception occurred, right? Something like that. So let's go ahead and do number format exception occurred. Great. Make sure I have my semicolon and the curly braces closed. So let's fix up the syntax quick up here. It's lowercase p. Make sure Java recognizes the syntax here for the extra set of parentheses that I have. I'm going to get rid of that. And then fix up my println also. And fix up my code. Perfect. So, just another example of using the number format exception. Let's save this. So it's Control S, run it, and perfect. Our answer is, the output is number format exception occurred. So, a wonderful way of working with Java exceptions. So practice, and let's move on to the next lesson.